Randy Leonard or George Leonard, whatever you like.
Start from the beginning.
George Frank Craig Leonard. I'm a lifelong resident of town of Woodstock. My father came here in St. Stephen in 1939 to join the Carlton York Regiment at 20. He and mother were married that fall, and my father left for England 2 weeks after they were married. Expeditionary Force, second man to shake the king's hand in Scotland. And he was in several bases all over shot and all over southern England training for a couple of years before he was sent to Sicily. Landed in North Africa, fought their way through Sicily and Italy up all the way up the coast to, didn't attend Ortona, but he was outside the Hitler line, the Gulch, several big battles. My father was in there, and ended up outside Rome, very close to Rome, and they stood down for some other folks to go through. And after that, he was on his motorcycle at night, and the bridge had been taken out in the daytime, went off the bridge at about 50 miles an hour and 30 to 40 feet in the air, and smashed into a rock pile. And his passenger on the back of the bike was from Sussex, a good friend of his. They both ended up in hospital, were both shipped back to England, northern England, where the hospital was, where they kept them. And he was 6 or 7 months in the hospital. And by 1945, he was ready to come back to London to rejoin the Carlton Regiment, who were at that time rescuing, or if you will, overtaking the Germans in Holland. And my dad said to the officer in question, "I'm not going back in." And he said, "Don't be insolent with me, you're going back in." I said, "No, I'm not." So an argument ensued, and my father said to the officer, "If you'll check your records, we'll end this argument." He checked his records and he said, "Oh, you have long service, you've been here 6 years, you're going back to Canada." So my father came back to Canada and spent his entire life and career here in Woodstock, and died at the ripe old age of 83. He had a brother, Ralph, who was Air Force, who was shot down over Germany and was a prisoner of war for 3 years in Germany. He had another brother, Lloyd, who was Canadian Air Force, stationed in England, and he had another brother, Norton, who was Canadian Army in Germany. And the youngest brother, Carl, who was in the Merchant Marine during the Second World War, ended up with the Black Watch in Korea. Having all served, all the brothers, none of them never, and they all came back to Canada, which is a great story. Anything else?
Yeah, tell us tell us about his life afterwards.
My father
How
was,
he remembered it, or if he ever communicated.
he communicated to me, but not in, all I ever heard about, I would take him to reunions with the Carlton York all over the province. Dad never talked much about the war. It was a kind of a subject that he would tell me if they got into a wine cellar, a bunch of them, and had a good time. Or I heard about the time they killed a pig with a submachine gun, so they got some pork. Or when they got into a lime factory and went down, and got a wall, woke up white. He told me after my mom died, and we were sitting on the couch at Christmas time, and I we talked. He said he was in Italy, up near the Liri Valley, and on one side of the valley, their truck, their Jeep, several pieces of equipment, and 15 guys, and his officer told him, "Mr. Leonard, you go back and pick up your bike down the road. It's 3 clicks down the road. It's off the road, it's full of mud, you can't get it going. You go back, you clean it up, you get it started, and you get back up here on the double. Well, Dad ran back and got the bike out of the mud and got it all cleaned off and got it going. And when he drove up to this side hill, there were 8 men piled up dead, hit by an 88 from across the valley. The young officer that had ordered him back had lost one eye, and one of my father's worst days. He said, you know, lose 8 men at one time. But he lost several friends from St. Stephen, St. George, and from here in the war. And I said, and I told him that he left, which would be in the fall of 1944, to going to the hospital, and came back here to Canada. But he suffered most of his life with his injuries, in and out of military hospitals ever since I can remember. Halifax or St. John, or they'd send him somewhere else, because he had serious nasal injuries and back injuries. But he worked his entire life after the war as a postal worker, and before that he was into delivering bread and everything else. But he was tough, and that's what I appreciate about him. And now the other part of the story of my family and military connection is my mom's brother, who she never met, who I never met, my uncle, Bernard, was gassed at the Somme and was repatriated, brought back to Canada, died right here on the Esterbrook's Mountain. His lungs basically fell apart.
How long, do you know what year he passed?
I can't tell you, but his name's on the plaque up here, and
So it was considered a wartime death?
oh yeah, you know, the whole deal. My other wartime thing is my real name is George Duran Creighton. Creighton comes from my aunt's husband, who was shot to death in England by another Canadian, and his daughter is here in town, my cousin. An argument ensued in the barracks, and of course there's alcohol involved. Creighton jumped between the arguing parties and took the bullet in his route. He died. So that family's been here all my life. And the other one that I have to tell you about is that the living World War II Canadian Air Force, Earl Briggs, lives in this community, and he's a great friend of mine. I made a banner of him last, the only living one I've done. He and his friend, Herb Mallory, graduated from Woodstock High School in 42 or 43. Herb got in. Earl couldn't get in because of his age. The next year, Earl signed up and went to the Canadian Air Force and worked in the Mediterranean. And I don't know if he's an engineer or what he was, but he flew in the Mediterranean and came out without a scrape. Herb Mallory, who was from Jacksonville, Earl's best friend, was shot down over Germany. Ended up in a prison of war camp. And Herb, as they would let them out in the daytime to exercise and walk in the field next to the camp. Very next to the camp was a German fighter squadron and field, and they would traditionally, or all the time, would buzz the Canadian prisoners, try to terrorize them. Herb Mallory from Jacksonville was out there one day exercising, was hit by a German fighter pilot with his wing, killed him on the spot. Now this is a boy from Jacksonville, and my friend Earl's best pal. He's got a book about it up there. But just little stories like that come out, that you hear. One of the families that I did banners of last year, the Parker family. There was Lloyd, Donnie, Arthur, and a sister. 4 all signed up. Nursing sister. Arthur was killed in Ortona. Donnie was Air Force, and Lloyd was Army and came back. But I had no idea that, and I've known these people for 50 years. And I was into the house last summer, got all the pictures, did all the banners, and I heard this fantastic story about this family. And the same could be said of the Dibble family here in town. It's a very old, well-known family in the town. And I know the daughter really well, and she wanted a poster done of her Uncle Bob. Bobby was killed as an officer of the Carlton North Regiment in Ortonga. Gambaptiste actually outside Ortonga. And Kathy went over to Italy to see his gravesite. And I know some details about what happened and all that, but there was another uncle, Alan, her dad, and two sisters were both nursing sisters during the Second War. That's another family in this community had 4 serving at the same time. And I find that amazing. Amazing.
Speaking of which, George, I think we've got some more people that we've got coming here. Much appreciate your time and your stories.
All the stories I have, there's a lot more. And
I suspect there are.
There's a lot more, but unfortunately a lot of them are disappearing.
Well, I think this can be the start of a process rather than the end.
Okay.